Welcome back to On the Light. Today, I have a delightful conversation with John Schumacher. John began practicing yoga in 1970 and teaching in 1973. A former professional musician, he was drawn to yoga through a deep interest in consciousness and transformation. In 1975, he encountered light on yoga, which eventually led him to study with B.K.S. Iyengar in India in 1981. That relationship profoundly shaped his practice, teaching, and life. John is a certified Advanced Iyengar Yoga teacher and the founder of Unity Woods Yoga Center in Maryland. He has taught for over 40 years, leading workshops across the country and internationally. In our conversation, John recalls the intensity of his first experience in Pune, as well as the sweet memories of hosting Guruji in his home. Please enjoy this episode of On the Light. Thank you for meeting with me today.
No, it's my pleasure. I love talking about Iyengar Yoga and Guruji. And
So how did you first get started with Iyengar Yoga?
well, it's kind of funny. I started in 1970 with, basically Shivananda type of yogas, integral yoga, and Shivananda yoga, and some others. And there weren't very many people practicing back then. There weren't very many people teaching either. I became involved with a very small group in the DC area of teachers. And we would have meetings periodically, once a month, something like that, and get together and share information. Somebody had been to a workshop or somebody had read a book or something like that. And I came in one day to the hostess's house, and nobody was in the living room where they usually met. And I heard noise upstairs. She had a studio upstairs. So I went upstairs, and they were all up there, like maybe half a dozen people. And a couple of them were pushing each other against the wall. I'd never seen anybody do that before. And I said, "What's going on?" And they said, so-and-so went to an Iyengar workshop. What's that? I never heard of that. Oh, you never heard of Light on Yoga, B.K.S. Iyengar? No, this was 1975 by now. Okay. And so somebody brought a copy of Light on Yoga and showed it to me. And I had been mostly working from books anyway, primarily from Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga by Swami Vishnudevananda and Integral Yoga Hatha by Swami Satchidananda, and a couple of other books, and very few classes or workshops, because there just weren't very many back then. I looked in the back of Light on Yoga and I thought, whoa, because this was old, silver books where the pictures were all in the back and the text was all in the front. So I turned to the back and looked at the pictures and I went, whoa, this is a lot more interesting than what I'm doing. It looks a little more challenging. So I got a copy of the book and looked at the back of the book, and I'd been practicing for 5 years at that point, and I could put my feet behind my head and do, fancy things like that. And so I thought, well, I'll start with Course 3. So I looked at the back of the book, Course 3, and I knew no Sanskrit. So I would look at the name of the pose, I'd turn all the pages and go to the back of the book and see what the picture looked like. I'd read the instructions and I'd do the pose. And I did that for a couple of days only. And then I thought, maybe I better go back to Course 2. And I did that for a few days, and I said, this is completely different to me and much more challenging, and I just will start on Course 1 first week and work my way through. And that's what I did for the next 5 years. Wow. And I never had an Iyengar class during that time. There weren't any Iyengar teachers in this area. I got to the beginning of the third course, something like that, while I was doing that. Then I heard that this teacher was coming to, one of my students actually told me that this teacher was coming to Cambridge, Mass, who was very close to Iyengar, one of the most senior Iyengar teachers in the world, and he was going to do a 2-week intensive. So I thought, well, what a great opportunity. So I went up there and spent the 2 weeks, and the teacher was Victor von Koten. At that point, they've since had something of a rift. He and Guruji had something of a rift, but at that point, they were still very close to one another. And I, in fact, had one class in the DC area before that, maybe only 6 months before that. Karen Steffen, whom I since came to know and became good friends with, but I knew nothing of her. And she had been in Europe studying with this guy named Rishi. And she came and did a workshop, 2-hour workshop, I believe it was. And at that point, as happened to so many of us, she was trying to be a little Iyengar, and she was running around shouting at people. And I had a beard there and hair below my shoulder blades, and I was into peace and love, and all the shouting and slapping stuff didn't work for me. I realized from her teaching that I knew absolutely nothing about these poses just from reading the book, and I needed to learn more. So I went up there and did the class with, did the 2 weeks with Victor von Koten, and he was not anything like that. I don't know if you've ever been with Victor or know anything about him, but he was an artist before he was a yogi, and he's Dutch, and he had this way of speaking, and a tremendous sense of humor. He was very funny, amazing information about the poses. There were probably 50 people in the workshop, and he would sometimes put us in a pose and then go around and adjust every single person in the pose. He just had such energy and such compassion and such brilliance in terms of his teaching that I was blown away. And so I had not been interested in going to India to see B.K.S. Iyengar, but I was so blown away with Victor's teaching that I wrote a letter to Guruji, who was not Guruji in those days and had nothing to do with guru stuff at all. He was Mr. Iyengar. And I wrote to Mr. Iyengar and I said, I just took a workshop with Victor von Koten. I've been practicing with your book for 5 years, and I have a daily practice, and can I come and study? And he wrote back, very terse, but direct letter that said, yes, you may come. There's an intensive, January, whatever it was, 1981. This was 80, I'm writing to him. He said, make your own arrangements. So I did that, and I went, and that was it. I was into Iyengar Yoga.
Mm-hmm. What was that intensive like?
Intense. That's the way he taught in those days. You would go for 3-week intensives. And usually some country, there weren't associations so much back then, but some country would get the students from that country together, the Dutch group or the South African group or the English group, and take that group over to Pune. I wasn't part of any group, I just showed up. He paid very little attention to me. Again, I said what I looked like, and so I was noticeable because of that. But he paid very little attention to me until about midway through the second week. And we were doing Uttita Hasta Palangushtasana 1 at the wall on the ropes, and I'm holding the ropes and foot's up on the wall, and then I feel him next to me, and it was like, what do you think you're doing? You think you know so much. And then it was off, and from then on, I did take a workshop, a senior Australian Iyengar teacher. And in that workshop, I was doing something that he didn't like, and he said, if you do that when you go to study in India, he'll be on you like a terrier on a rat. And so he was on me like a terrier on a rat. He was merciless. We would sit in pranayama, and I would try to sit straight and sit upright, and all of a sudden say, relax, lower this shoulder. So I went into extreme cognitive dissonance while I was there. I would, after those kinds of interactions, I would wake up in the morning and I felt sort of like a prisoner in a jail with a time, there was a time this was going to end, and I was scratching days off on the wall. Only 10 more days, only 9 more days. It was so intense, and I was so overwhelmed. The yoga was so fabulous that by the end of the day, I would go and sit up on the roof of the Chetak Hotel, and the sun would be setting, and it's terrible air pollution, so the sunsets were beautiful, and parrots are flying by, and the breeze is blowing through the palm trees, and I could spend the rest of my life in India. Mm-hmm. Then I would wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, another day. And so by the end of that, I was a total basket case. I was going to go to Goa and spend a week vacationing while I was there. I canceled that workshop. Intensive was over. Next day, I got on a plane and went home. And I wasn't going to go back again. I'd studied with B.K.S. Iyengar. It was on my resume, good stuff on your resume. And then 6 months later, I'm writing a letter to go back again, because Well, first I was curious as to, I thought I was, I'd practiced yoga for a while. I was pretty well steeped into it. What happened to my equanimity? It was totally shot in that experience. And so I thought, I need to go back and find out what happened to me that I fell apart like that.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, I had started to teach because I had always taught the way I practiced. Because I'd never had any teacher training and I'd seen very few teachers. So I was able to do this stuff that was in the books. So I taught people how to do the stuff that was in the books, the way I'd learned it on my own. My teaching changed based on my interactions and experiences with Guruji. I became, like I described Karen, I became little Iyengarish, hollering at people and confronting people. And I lost half my students. But I got that many students more. So I then wrote to go back again, and I went back again in August of '82, a year and a half later. And on that second trip was probably, I learned so many things from him. It's just over 30 years is incalculable. And certainly information about poses and practice and all this sort of stuff. But probably the most significant thing I remember learning from him as a direct teaching from him was during that second trip. And I'd worked hard in the year and a half since I'd been, and I'd improved a lot. I didn't realize that at the time, but he's Guruji, and he saw immediately that I'd been working hard like that, that my poses had improved. And so he had me come on the platform and do Ardha Chandrasana. And so I'm standing there in Ardha Chandrasana, my hand is down, and people are standing around looking. And he says, "You see this fella? He's stretching his arms, he's stretching his legs. The shape of the pose is good, but he's working completely from his head. He has to learn how not to work from his head in these poses, but to work from his heart in the poses." Well, at that time, I had no idea what he was talking about. But I began to contemplate that in my practice and in my study. And now I think I have a much better understanding of what he meant by that. And it completely transformed my practice and the goal, the intention of my practice, and thus my teaching. So it was a very powerful moment for me.
Yeah, I bet. And I would think though that in that moment, how could a person get up on that stage and not be in their head about what's happening? Do you know what I mean? Like that's pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, maybe after 20 or 30 years, one might be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I think what he saw, he said to me one time, "Oh, you're very intelligent. You catch all this stuff quickly, but you need to do this." And so I think he saw that the improvement in my practice let him know how serious and dedicated I was about my practice. And I think that that's a step in levels to go from working from your head, remembering all these details, looking at your notes, studying all this stuff, and working from your heart and the essence of your being. In the sutras, it says, Hridaye Chitta Samvit, that to understand the mind, you have to meditate on the heart. And so I think that he thought I might be ready for that and felt it was appropriate. One of the things that I've always been astonished, amazed, in awe of about his teaching, you read Light on Yoga and you read the first 55 pages or so of the introduction, and you could read that every day for the next 100 years and still get new stuff, information, depth, something from doing that. So he knew all that stuff way back then. He didn't teach any of us any of that stuff early on. We just weren't ready for it. So many teachers want to teach you everything they know, partly to let you know how much they know, and partly because they want to share all this stuff. But he had the wisdom, the temperament to just wait till we all, most of us who were serious about it, begin to be ready to take those more philosophical teachings.
So at what point did you notice he started to incorporate those teachings?
Oh, time is kind of funny these days. What happened when and for how long. But it was probably in the 80s, early 90s. If I had to guess a date, I might be off by 10 or 15 years, but somewhere in there he began to incorporate the teachings more. We began to do the invocation to Patanjali somewhere in that time. People began to call him Guruji. And so there was a shift in around that period of time.
I do remember hearing it was either at the 70th birthday or 80th birthday, he came out with a pamphlet. Maybe you remember that was like described the Panchakoshas and some of the philosophy.
Right. And I think probably the one intensive or workshop, whatever you want to call it, that I missed, that I really, really wish I had not missed, was the training in Panchgani. And I think that was 75, or no, not 75, when was it? 80? Anyway, I don't know. All the things I've heard about that workshop, including the fact that he began to teach much more about the philosophy and the subtleties of mind, breath, and asana.
Did you have any, with all your time spent there, did you have time spent with him also outside of the practice hall, outside of classes?
Well, not so much in India. I went to a dinner with him a couple of times and a group of other people. But he came to my house twice here in the U.S. And came to, it was after conventions, and he came in 91, I think it was, and visited the house and stayed with me for the 3 days he was in Washington. And he had been in Washington back in 1954, I learned. It didn't go that well because Washington was segregated in those days, and there were white bathrooms and colored bathrooms. And so he had to go to colored bathrooms. He was discriminated against in that fashion. And he, at that time, said he wasn't going to come back. Things changed, obviously, and he did come back. And so I arranged for him to give a talk at University of District of Columbia, University of DC, and a demonstration of therapeutics, and took him around to sightsee Washington, because there's infinite amazing stuff in this city. And then one other time he came after the Estes Park Light on Life tour, workshop, convention, and then that was the, as I say, Light on Life tour. He came to the house then and lived in a different house then, bigger house. And again, we took him around Washington, had the Washington Post come out and interview him, and we had a cover in the style section and all that stuff. So I had those times outside of class with him. The first time, when he came that first time in 91, I was scared to death. I hadn't had much interaction with him at all except for in class.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what am I going to do. And he travels with an entourage. It was Birju and Jawar, Mahadevo, the business guy from Bombay, and a couple other people. And I had one of my students who was also a teacher at the center in those days. He drove the van. We had a van, and we picked them all up at the airport, and we're riding back up along the Potomac River, and you ride up on the Virginia side, and you can see the Washington Monument and Jefferson Memorial and all this stuff over there. And we're looking out the windows. Jawar says, "You have a TV?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He says, "You can get the World Cup on TV?" I said, "I could get ESPN, so I guess I can get the World Cup." He said, "Oh, good." So we got back to the house, they unloaded, put their stuff in the house. I made a big bowl of popcorn, we turned on the TV, and we hung out and watched soccer, or football as they call it. So that was a real icebreaker, and it was easier after that.
Oh, that's great.
But he is a fabulous house guest, wonderful conversationalist, of course has amazing stories. He's different outside of class than he is in class in some significant ways. And of course, he's also the same in many ways.
So how would you say, what are some things that you noticed over the years in terms of the arc of his practice and the arc of his teaching?
Well, I mentioned the gradual shift from just asanas, lots of asanas, heavy asanas, strong practice, lots of points, to more basic stuff, a lot more standing poses later on. Even though we did standing poses earlier, we did everything earlier. There was a lot of standing poses later on. and the pace was slower. There was a lot more repetition than just doing, 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 doing. So that changed. We held poses longer. And at one point, one of the things he said was, when I was young, I used to play, now I stay. And watching him do his practice in the mornings, he would just get into Dvipada Viparita Dandasana and stay there for 10 minutes. I mean, this was, staying in it for a minute was a real challenge for me.
Yeah, right.
Watching him do that for 10 minutes was like, something else is going on here. So that internalization, that process of shifting from doing poses to being immersed in poses, to just being the pose, that began to be part of his focus in teaching. And he would do it as he thought students were ready for it, but it definitely became an essential part of what he was trying to convey to us, that there is more than lining your bones up and doing 10 repetitions of this. There's an internal process, what's happening in your breath, what's happening in your sense organs, what's your state of mind, all those sorts of things began to be part of the teaching.
Did you notice a change in the way that you taught then as well?
That I taught?
Yeah.
Sure, I still teach based on my practice.
Yeah.
And so, I tried to emulate him in many respects, not all respects. And I respect, I saw that you do this stuff with Prashant on a regular basis. And Prashant is, I haven't studied a lot with Prashant, but some of the few times I have is his emphasis on, don't try to be Guruji. Be yourself, be your own practice. And I think there's real value in that. That's one of his great teachings, as far as I'm concerned, is we shouldn't be looking outside ourselves past a certain point when we're taking information, and make this process, this whole experience, internal and our own. And so one of the things that I used to tell my apprentices, I never did teacher trainings. I had apprentices from way back when. And one of the things that I told them was, don't say what I say. There was a period of time when everybody was saying, when you teach Guruji's teachings, you must use his exact words. You must say exactly what he said. And that was a thing for a while. I said, you don't do that. Do what you practice. When you teach what you practice, then you're authentic. If you just are reading your notes and teaching that in class, that's not you. That's not authentic. You might as well go in and read them the notes as do that. So my teaching began to evolve in that respect. And I tried, as I say, to emulate him in one of the ways of not giving too much to more beginning students. I've always taught we're all beginners as well as, advanced students. And so teaching Trikonasana to a student who's been doing it for 6 months is very different from teaching somebody who's been doing it for 16 years.
How about over the years, more and more teachers started to teach in Pune at the Institute, Prashant and Gitaji. Were they teaching kind of full time when you were going there?
Don't know how much Prashant was teaching. Gitaji was teaching, and I went to an intensive with her in '87, and a couple of other times, plus, of course, studying with her at conventions. The difference in their teaching was really interesting to me, in that Guruji liked students who were fast, who caught fast, moved fast, like that, because that's kind of the way he was. Gita, on the other hand, she could, of course, do that. And I went to the Backbend Intensive in '91, and we did backbends every day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks, for 2 to 4 hours every morning. And it was, when it was over, Guruji said, "Thank God." And now that I'm older and a little closer and beyond the age he was then, that he had the stamina to do that is just amazing, awesome. So he taught that way, fast. And he took to those students. He paid more attention to those students. The students who couldn't keep up, he usually didn't pay much attention to, or, got on them and tried to pick them up a little bit, and it worked or it didn't work. Gita saw everybody in the class, as did Guruji, but she saw those who needed help, those who weren't quick, those who weren't catching. And she was brilliant at finding ways to connect with those people and to take them from where they were to where she wanted them to be in terms of the asanas. So I think for just as a teacher to students who are learning from the basics, she's a pretty incomparable teacher. Mm-hmm. For experiencing the vastness, to use his word, we always chuckle. Early on, he would say the vastness. And we go after class and say, why is he talking about a wasp nest in these classes? till we figured out what he meant. Gita could do this also, but he could, almost by his presence, take you into that vastness of the subject. Yeah, I'm one of the most fortunate people in the world to have been able to have that experience of studying directly with him.
Yeah, you are, and there's not that many of you.
No, we're diminishing in numbers. Oh, I'll show you a prize. Is it here? These are Guruji's sandals.
Oh my gosh.
He left them at my house the second time he came and stayed at the house with his entourage. He said, "Will these fit you?" They were by the door, of course. And I tried them on. He says, "You keep them." So I don't wear them. I wore them to a convention one night just to show them off. But that's very special.
Pleasure. Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yep.
Like the ruby slippers.
Yeah, beyond the ruby slippers. He used to call me Baba John. So I've got a copy of Light on Life dedicated to Baba John and things. So I had a very good relationship with him after that first time. After the first time, it was like, but from the second time on, I just loved him.
Aren't you grateful you went back?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's like a life changer. How about any other memories from conventions or stories that you want to tell about him?
Oh, let's see.
I want this. If you want me to spark your memory.
No, I can think of a few things. One convention used to be, many of the earlier conventions, he would teach in the morning, 3 hours or whatever it was. And then he would get the senior teachers together and we would teach in the afternoons, and we would break out into smaller groups and he'd tell us what he wanted us to teach. So one day we met before we went to lunch, before the afternoon classes, and he said, I want all of you, there were probably, 12, 15 of us, something like that. I want all of you to teach Shavasana this afternoon. 45 minutes. Talking the whole time, no silence. Wow. That was quite the challenge, a very interesting experience to do that. And to try to draw the resources from within yourself to know what to say that wasn't just ridiculous or repetitive. So that was a memorable event.
So one Shavasana for 45 minutes?
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right. At I think it was the San Diego convention, did an arm balance demonstration, and Patricia did a back bend demonstration, and George Purvis did a Viparita Chakrasana demonstration. So people were demonstrating. That the next day when I was teaching in the afternoon breakout class, he came in and he said, when you're doing these arm balances, what attention do you pay to the heel in your hand pressing the floor? How does that press? I said, oh, well, I was pressing the heel of the hand. He said, you never thought of that. I said, you're right. And he chuckled. And he left me alone. It couldn't fool him. There was no fooling him. Which was liberating. No sense trying, just be real. He was very impressed with the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial in DC, and he read the words on the wall. He said, very wise man. This man was a very wise man. Let's see, I went to dinner, as I said, I went to dinner with him and a group of mostly Indians one evening. There were maybe 8 of us. They brought dinner out, and after the first bite, I couldn't taste anything the rest of the night. Tears were running down my cheeks. It was so hot, so hot. It was one of the two hottest meals I ever had in my life. The other one was in a Vietnamese restaurant here in DC. But I'd eaten lots of Indian food in Indian restaurants in India and elsewhere, but nothing like that. That was quite the experience.
Did Guruji find it hot?
He never said a word. I didn't see tears running down his cheeks.
That's not.
But he did not eat hot food, very hot food as a rule, was my experience. When it used to be that at the end of the 3-week intensives, the family would cook a meal and serve the meal personally to all the students. And usually there were 30, 35 people in the intensives in those days. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't hot. It was pretty mild, the food that they prepared and served to us. Mm-hmm. And of course, sweets. He loved sweets. He loved ice cream. And if you read in Light on Life, he talks about temptations.
Yeah.
And he talks about ice cream in there. So when he came to the house, this is before Light on Life. It was before I had read Light on Life. It had just come out. When he came to the house, you had to be careful about giving him ice cream because he didn't eat eggs. And almost all ice cream has eggs in it. So egg yolk or egg. Mm-hmm. So we have a brand of ice cream around here that's really good ice cream and doesn't have eggs in it. So fixed him up this great big bowl of ice cream after dinner. I gave him too much now in retrospect. I wanted to give him lots of ice cream, but now I think of myself eating that much ice cream before going to bed. And of course he ate it all. And I think he ate it all. I mean, I served it to him, so he's going to eat it. Mm-hmm. He did like ice cream. So a little sorry I gave him that much ice cream at the time. One of my students was she was an Indian. I have quite a number of Indian students. I don't have that many students now. And she was Brahmin. So good to have a Brahmin cook food for Guruji. He being a Brahmin. Wow. So she came out and fixed the meal, brought the meal out. It was all prepared. It was a wonderful meal. And then we had ice cream. And of course, there was always a tussle in the mornings. Mary Dunn was there. Who else was there? Patricia was there. The Indians, Birju, Jawar were there. His grandson was there. It was always a tussle as to who among that entourage was going to fix his coffee and have it ready for him. And his coffee, that's another of his sins, according to him. His vices. Ramamani used to get up and fix him coffee at 3 or 4 in the morning. But coffee for him is about that much espresso in a cup with a bunch of sugar and milk. So he's not drinking.
Right.
Coffee.
Do you remember in Estes Park? I was there, and I remember, I think it was the night that there was the interview at Benin. I think it was that night. But then Guruji ended up calling you up to the front to demonstrate something. I think he had you do full arm balance, and then we were looking at your eyes. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do. I guess maybe it was full arm balance. It was before he had me do Tadasana. He said, now look at this fellow's eyes. And it's a little cloudy, a little depressed looking. Now do full arm balance. And he had somebody hold me there for a while, like I stay, and gave me instructions and everything. And then I said, come down and stood up. Now look at his eyes. How bright they are, how powerful this pose is. And he went on full arm balance. Yes, I remember that. And at dinner, the final dinner at Estes Park, I was fortunate to be able to sit next to him. I sat on his left hand. He said, something's going on with you. What's happening with you? I said, well, I don't know. I had a physical exam, and the doctor said I had some slight blockage in my descending ventricular artery. He said, well, and what does a plumber do when there's blockage? I said, well, I don't know. He says, he increases the flow. He reams out the blockage and increases the flow. So the next day, while people were teaching on stage, because all of the senior teachers got to teach some. There's another story. And he had me go back to the horse, the Tressler, and gave me a bunch of different asanas to do and how to do them. Ardha Chandrasana on the Tressler, but with my arm over the back and this whole side of my chest opened up. And I still have the sequence of what he gave me. Birya, Fike, took the notes. He put blocage du cœur. So it was some of it in French, but he gave me the notes afterwards because I was just doing it. So I practiced that for quite some time. I do other things now, but I don't have heart problems that I'm aware of. Something else came to mind as I was telling you. So yes, teaching on stage. Rather than try to think of what Guruji would say and emulate what I'd seen him teach, he had me teach Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, and I forget what else. I only remember Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. And I had off and on, not off and on, but every now and then, you run into a problem. Your shoulder gives you pain for a day or two, or your back is cranky for a week or something like that. Then you work through it and you figure out what to do. So I had found in doing Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, when my back was a little twingy at one point, that if I kept my knees on the floor, I could drop my pelvis while I stretched the arms and lifted the chest, and it created a kind of attraction that would help align the sacrum, the SI joints, the lumbar spine. So when I went to teach Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, I started to teach it that way. And after not very long, he doesn't let you go astray very far. It was, that's not Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. You're teaching them Bhujangasana. Teach them a correct way. And he sort of, got on me a bit about that. So teaching in front of him was always an adventure. But invaluable because of what you learned from his response to what you were doing. He was, when we were doing afternoon breakouts at one of the, not that one, but at one of the other conventions, and he would walk around from room to room with his entourage. And, the minute they walked in the room, even if your back was to him, you could look from the students' eyes getting big that Guruji had come into the room. And so I was teaching Chatushpadasana at the time. And he looked around the room and he said, "This pose is God's gift to man." Smiled and walked out of the room.
Didn't elaborate on it at all.
No, that was it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you ever find out why he would call that?
I can only speculate based on my own practice and experience in that. And watching him practice in later years, he did lots more supported poses, stayed for longer times. And I watched him one morning. He was in supported Setubandha Sarvangasana. His shoulders were up on those thick mats that they have at the Institute, maybe 4 or 5 of those, and his head down on the floor, his shoulders up on the mat. And he had his hands in his back. I do it these days, but I usually put myself on a brick to do it that way because my wrists get tired and I want to stay longer than that. His wrist didn't get tired. He stayed there for a really long time, legs straight. And so I began to practice that a little more often myself. Now I do very few arm balances anymore. I do back bends, but a lot of them are supported. I found that in my own practice, I'll be 80 in December, in my own practice, that if I tried to practice the way I practiced when I was 45, I just beat myself up and exhausted myself. And I'd have to go to sleep for 2 hours in the afternoon. After a little bit of that, I said to myself, why are you practicing yoga? I don't think it's to wipe yourself out. So I began to adjust my practice. So I challenge myself. I play edges. I work hard at it. But I spend more time, as I say, for back bends over the chair, off the bricks. I live in 2 places, so I have the horse in one place, and when I have the horse, I work with that, or the stool, or the bench. So having spent more and more time in later years in supported Setubandha Sarvangasana, it's just an amazing pose. Internally, well, physically, bones and muscles wise, it is a great pose for aligning the spine, aligning the sacrum, keeping mobility of the spine, toning the spinal muscles, toning the shoulders and upper back muscles, toning the leg muscles. So it has those benefits. Physiologically, it opens the chest up tremendously. It's a great preparation for pranayama. It is tremendous work on the internal organs, creating space in the intestines, and work for the liver and the spleen. So it works physiologically in a deep way. And it is difficult enough that it holds your attention readily. You put yourself in Adho Mukha Virasana on a bolster, and it's easy to just sort of daydream your way through 5 or 10 minutes. In supported Setubandha, not so much. There are subtle adjustments that can be made, and how those subtle adjustments affect your breath and how that affects your state of mind, all of those things. It's a wealth of opportunity for deepening one's understanding. And of course, all the asanas are that. But because it is a backbending pose, even though it's Sarvangasana, it's a backbending pose, it's invigorating and sharpens the brain and helps you to catch things that might be elusive in other poses.
And it can be practiced in so many different variations.
Right.
Did you spend much time in the medical classes helping out?
Not too much, not really. A few, and I did assist in maybe 3 or 4 of them. But no, I would do the asanas and then I would eat and go home and rest and come back for pranayama in the afternoon or whatever the schedule was. So not very much in the medical classes. And, I spent in the mid-'80s, 5 years or more maybe, studying with Donna Holloman. And Donna Holloman was the senior European teacher back in those days. And she taught Victor von Koten and Angela Farmer and those people. She knew, we had a woman in the class one time who had amputated below the knee. She showed her how to do Ardha Chandrasana, and she knew how to deal with those things. But when asked about it, she would tell people, I'm not a physiotherapist, I'm a yoga teacher. So I sort of adopted that attitude at the time, and it lingered with me. My interest in the medical class, the therapeutic applications, was, of course, to be able to help students who needed help. But I did have medical classes at Unity Woods for a few years, a couple of days a week for classes, and we would have folks with Parkinson's and cancer and heart problems and MS and various kinds of things. But what I found was, unless you're going to have a medical class often, like 3 or 4 times a week, I find it didn't really work very well because people wouldn't practice. We'd show them what to do. I'd have assistants, and we'd show them what to do and how to set up. And they'd come in the next week and they wouldn't have any idea how to set up, what to do. They improved some, but not what they might have had they really worked on what I gave to them. So I sort of lost it and didn't have very many people doing it. So I sort of gave that up after a while.
Well, John, what advice would you give to new teachers on how to keep Guruji's legacy at the forefront?
Practice. First and foremost. I mean, that was at the end of the Light on Life Estes Park event. Yoga Journal called me and said, because I used to write for them a lot, called me and said, would you do an interview with Mr. Iyengar? And one of the things we want you to ask him is what advice he has for his American students. So I did do an interview with him, and I did ask him that, and he said, you're older now, you've been practicing for a long time, you're mature in your practices. I urge you to maintain your practice, not to lose ground. Not so much about making progress now in the asanas, but to maintain what you've learned, what you've gained in the asanas. And now that I'm older, I see the value in that. It's not easy to maintain the intensity and the depth of one's practice. It's challenging. But I'm also reminded of the 30th Sutra in the first pada, where 9 obstacles are listed. And the last one is failure to make progress is the 8th one. and failure to maintain the progress you've made is the ninth one. So that teaching of his is direct from Patanjali. So my advice to people first is to practice, for newer students to establish their practice and be dedicated. Of course, one of the sutras says to attain samadhi, you have to practice for a long time without interruption and dedicated with devotion. Satyadirgha kala narayantarya satkara sabito dridabhumihi. Long time without interruption. So establish that practice. That's the first order of business. Keep studying, be open to new things, don't become mechanical or habitual. And Abhijata emphasizes that a lot, or she does in the few times I've studied with her, how important it is to be creative. You have to be careful in being creative. One time in class, Guruji said to somebody who was doing something that was different from what is normally done. And he said, "You people, your creativity is my destruction." So not just to do something because it's new, but not to be inhibited from exploring new things just because it's been done this way for a period of time. And I would say also to involve yourself in the community. It's a support for you in your own practice. It's a great opportunity for learning new things. It's a seva, it's a service. It's karma yoga. That's of value for more beginning students.
I have found through my service, both my regional region and INOS, to be very rewarding and also fruitful. Like the relationships I've made, people I've met, I agree with that. I mean, it's invaluable. Was there anything else that you wanted to share?
Just gratitude, really, for, as I said earlier, having the remarkable, amazing, good fortune to experience Guru's teaching and just his presence, the man himself. That gratitude is something all of us should feel who are our Iyengar students for just the invaluable teachings that he's given to all of us, the guidance that those teachings provide that are transformative for our lives. And my life is clearly very different for having been a student of Guruji's than had I not. I'm sure whatever depth I've been able to attain in yoga practice and study, I would not have found without his intensity and his brilliance. And I doubt that I would have. I was regular in my practice. I had made a commitment at age 25 to exercise for an hour a day every day, because I had a little epiphany that told me that health was a really important part of life, since I was trying to figure out what was important in life. And so I made that commitment to do an hour a day, and somebody gave me a yoga book, and so it turned out to be yoga. To have such a wonderful tool to guide our lives and enrich our lives, I think gratitude is important.
Well, thank you, John. This has been really nice.
My pleasure, Susan. Great to talk to you. And as I said, love talking about yoga, Iyengar yoga, the Iyengars. It's a treat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Namaskar. Thank you for listening to this episode of On the Light. Today, I want to end by reading the passage mentioned about ice cream from Light on Life. You have arrived home late and tired from work. On the way, you stopped off for pizza, and so you're no longer particularly hungry. Once in the kitchen, as if by magic, you find yourself opening the freezer door. Inside sits a tub of vanilla ice cream. The following sequence of events takes place. 1. Your eyes, sense organs, light on the ice cream, read the label, vanilla, and carry the information back to the mind for decoding and identification. A link is established. A, external object. B, sense organ. C, mind. 2, mind, as it always does, relays this information to the egoic self. The link of the chain are now A plus B plus C plus D, ego. 3, quick as a flash, ego and mind go into a huddle, and memory which is contained in mind is brought into play. A question is automatically put to memory. Does the act of eating vanilla ice cream result in pleasure or pain? 4. Without hesitation, memory replies, pleasure. 5. Ego says, okay, give it to me. And mind coordinates the hand, organ of action, movements necessary to take the tub off the shelf, open it, and find a spoon. The rest is history. Let us now go back to stage 4 and see if any other outcome might have been possible, and if so, how. 5a. Mind and ego are vaguely aware of a sort of static buzz in the background of consciousness, as if someone were trying to get their attention. This makes them uneasy, so they turn around, away from the open fridge, and see intelligence jumping up and down. May I ask memory a question? It asks. 6a. Mind and self shuffle their feet, sensing trouble, but finally reply, we'd rather you didn't, but if you insist, we cannot deny you a chance. 7a. Thank you, says intelligence. Memory, please tell me what happens when you eat ice cream night after night. What are the consequences? 8a. Memory has a truthful nature, though on occasion it can make mistakes. Memory replies, you put on a lot of weight. Can't fit into your new trousers. Have sinusitis, and your arthritis flares up. Left to itself, memory from past acquired taste will make the mistake of saying, go ahead, eat it, enjoy. It is the intervention of intelligence that poses the more complex question. Do we live to eat or eat to live? 9a. Intelligence continues to hold the floor. Let me summarize our predicament. It says, we all enjoy eating ice cream, even in excess. We all hate the secondary consequences of this. You especially, ego, being so vain about your figure. It seems to me we have a choice, to eat it or not to eat it. That must be clear to all of us. Cognition plus choice. 10a. Poor mind is utterly confused as, in spite of its name, it does not really have a mind of its own. It will run on any direction, just like a dog after a ball. Normally, it lets ego give the orders, and ego is now very upset. I always eat ice cream when I'm tired after a long, hard day. It's a great comfort to me. I owe it to myself. It's who I am. 11a. Intelligence, who is also annoyed about the trousers, though in its case, it's more about the stupid waste of money. Speaks up for the last time. For once, I'm going to put my foot down, Will. I'm fed up with the rut you two are in, always the same, day in, day out, and then whining about the consequences, or dreaming about how good things used to be, or will be again one day. Nothing's going to change unless we do. Challenge. Mind, please tell hand to move away from the ice cream and shut the freezer door, which it does. 12a. And next day, they all felt better for the very way things had turned out. In fact, ego was very smug and had quite persuaded itself that leaving the ice cream had been its idea all along. I just love that passage. It's so real and something that I'm sure we can all relate to on several occasions of coming home after a long day of work. If you've been enjoying On the Light and would like to support the podcast, consider making a small monthly donation. Your support helps cover production costs and allows me to continue sharing meaningful conversations like this one. Every contribution, no matter the size, makes a difference, and I'm truly grateful for your support. You can find the donation link in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Namaskar.